Hello and welcome. I'm Fernando, a GP in the UK. Today, we will go through the assessment and management of hypomagnesemia, focusing on what is relevant in primary care only. For this advice, I have looked at the published guidance by a number of NHS organisations in the UK, including Dorset, Lanarkshire, Gloucestershire, Cornwall and Kent and Medway. The links to them are in the episode description. Right, let's jump into it. Hypomagnesemia is defined as a serum magnesium concentration below 0.7 millimole per litre. The normal reference range for serum magnesium is between 0.7 and 1 or 1.05 millimole per litre, depending on the guideline used. Magnesium is the second most abundant intracellular electrolyte after potassium and is an essential cofactor in numerous enzyme systems. It also regulates the transport of calcium and potassium across cell membranes, contributing to neuromuscular conduction, muscle contraction, and cardiac rhythm. The majority of total body magnesium is stored in bone and soft tissue, and only around 1% is in extracellular fluid. Therefore, serum levels may not accurately reflect total body stores. It is possible to see a normal serum level when there is a total body magnesium deficit, like in a chronic magnesium deficiency, secondary to inadequate dietary magnesium intake. The reverse, that is, a low serum level and normal total body magnesium, is also possible and is usually seen with drugs which increase excretion of magnesium. Additionally, approximately 25% of plasma magnesium is bound to albumin, so high or low albumin states can also affect the magnesium levels. Changes in magnesium levels usually occur gradually over months or years, and symptoms are often absent, particularly when serum levels are only mildly reduced. They become more common when concentrations fall below 0.5, but there are times when they may also occur in the 0.5 to 0.7 range. The most common symptoms are muscular and mobility symptoms, including muscle weakness, tremors, ataxia, spasms and fasciculations, neurological symptoms including dizziness, paresthesia, hallucinations, delirium, seizures, depression, confusion and coma, cardiovascular symptoms including ECG abnormalities, arrhythmias and increased sensitivity to digoxin, metabolic effects including altered glucose homeostasis and associations with hypocalcemia and hypokalemia, and finally, other symptoms such as anorexia, nausea, vomiting, and fatigue. But let's go back for a moment and ask, why is low magnesium associated with hypocalcemia and hypokalemia? Low magnesium can lead to hypocalcemia because magnesium is required for the release of PTH. When magnesium is very low, PTH secretion decreases, which leads to reduced calcium reabsorption in the kidneys and reduced calcium release from bone, resulting in low calcium levels. And what about hypokalemia? Here, the mechanism is connected to cellular pumps that regulate intra- and extracellular potassium homeostasis, which leads to increased renal potassium loss, causing potassium levels to decrease. Both the hypocalcemia and hypokalemia may be refractory to treatment until magnesium is corrected. Let's now look at the causes and risk factors of hypomagnesemia. The first cause is reduced intake, reduced absorption, or increased gut losses, like in malabsorption, including celiac disease, Crohn's disease, and short bowel syndrome, malnutrition, anorexia nervosa, chronic diarrhea, and excess alcohol intake. Increased renal loss, like in renal tubular disorders, diabetes and diabetic ketoacidosis, hyperaldosteronism, hyperthyroidism, and vitamin D deficiency. Drug-induced, like for example with the use of protopump inhibitors or PPIs, both loop and thiazide diuretics, theophylline, some chemotherapy agents, and digoxin. Also bear in mind that low magnesium may increase digoxin toxicity. And finally, miscellaneous causes such as acute pancreatitis and excessive lactation. We should prioritize the monitoring of magnesium in patients taking multiple risk drugs or with 2 or more risk factors. But let's pause for a moment. Did we just say that vitamin D deficiency also causes hypomagnesemia? Why is that? Well, in fact, the relationship between magnesium and vitamin D is bidirectional. That is, each influences the metabolism and availability of the other. For example, vitamin D deficiency can cause or worsen hypomagnesemia by reducing magnesium intestinal absorption and indirectly increasing its renal loss. Conversely, magnesium is a cofactor in the enzymatic steps that convert vitamin D to its active form, and as a result, magnesium deficiency can impair vitamin D activation and function. Therefore, both deficiencies often coexist, especially in patients with malabsorption, chronic disease, or poor nutrition, and they may exacerbate each other. Also, of all the drugs mentioned before, PPIs are probably the most commonly and widely prescribed. Because of reported cases of severe hypomagnesemia associated with prolonged PPI use, normally after 1 year but sometimes as early as 3 months, the MHRA has published a drug safety alert advising healthcare professionals to consider baseline magnesium measurement before starting PPIs and to monitor magnesium periodically during prolonged treatment, particularly in patients on diuretics or digoxin. We also need to reiterate that for patients on PPIs, symptoms may develop insidiously and be overlooked. PPI-related hypomagnesemia normally resolves upon magnesium replacement and discontinuation of the PPI. PPIs can also be obtained over the counter, but patients are advised not to take them for more than 4 weeks without consulting a doctor. Hypomagnesemia can be graded as mild when the levels are below 0.7 but above 0.5, moderate when the levels are 0.5 or below but above 0.4, and severe when the levels are 0.4 or below. Here, urgent referral is advised, especially if symptomatic or with concurrent low potassium or calcium. Let's now look at the general principles of management. We will treat underlying causes, discontinue offending drugs where possible, seeking advice if not feasible, consider switching PPIs to H2 antagonists like famotidine or nisatidine, and we will bear in mind that oral replacement is preferred for asymptomatic, mild or moderate deficiencies, whereas IV magnesium is required for severe deficiency, symptomatic, moderate deficiency, or if oral supplements are not tolerated. For oral replacement, we will look at the BNF, being aware that magnesium preparations may not be interchangeable due to differences in bioavailability. Therefore, we should prescribe by brand and should exercise caution when switching between them. Usually, the first-line treatment is with magnesium aspartate or magnaspartate, which comes in sachets and is preferred for all ages above 2 years. Second-line options include magnesium glycerophosphate tablets and magnesium citrate. Another oral option includes magnesium glycerophosphate in liquid form, which is unlicensed but is sometimes used when there are tolerability issues. Additionally, magnesium sulfate can be administered in secondary care by intravenous infusion or by intramuscular injection. And let's remember once more that IV replacement is required in severe hypomagnesemia when serum magnesium is 0.4 or below. In symptomatic moderate hypomagnesemia, that is when magnesium is between 0.4 and 0.5 and there are symptoms. And also any low level in a patient on digoxin with symptoms. Possible adverse effects of oral magnesium include diarrhea, so we should recommend having it with meals to reduce gastrointestinal irritation. We should also bear in mind that oral magnesium reduces the absorption of bisosonates, tetracyclines, and quinolone antibiotics. In terms of monitoring and follow-up, we should obviously monitor serum magnesium during and after replacement. Then continue rechecking at regular intervals in patients with ongoing risk factors, but also monitor for symptoms of hypomagnesemia, particularly in renal impairment. Possible symptoms of hypomagnesemia or high magnesium levels include respiratory depression, loss of reflexes, confusion, vomiting, cardiac arrhythmias, and coma. Cardiac arrest may occur at levels above 6 millimole per liter. And let's finish with a quick overview of recommended patient education. Patients who are at risk of hypomagnesemia, particularly those on long-term PPIs, should be advised to report symptoms such as tremor, vomiting, tiredness, muscle cramps, loss of appetite, and fatigue. They should also increase magnesium-rich foods, including green vegetables, wholemeal grains, nuts, pulses, and seafood. We should also advise them that hot water also contains magnesium salts, and advise over-the-counter magnesium supplements if there are no clinical concerns taking them, such as, for example, severe renal impairment, heart block, bradycardia, or myasthenia gravis. So that is it, a review of the guidance of the assessment and management of hypomagnesemia. We have come to the end of this episode. Remember that this is not medical advice, but only my summary and my interpretation of the guidance. You must always use your clinical judgment. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.